Now, this is about the boomerang generation. Some of you may be a part of that right now. I was a part of the boomerang generation, meaning I was one of those people that graduated from college and ended up moving back home with my parents for a year or so to save up money and then get my own place. But people are having to stay home with mom and dad longer than a year or so these days. So we're going to do a little quick case study into the boomerang generation to find out why this is happening. So Yahoo Finance, they talked about this. I'm going to do this article, and I actually want to show you a clip about this as well. If you're not familiar with Dave Ramsey has a show on YouTube. I think he also has a radio show. He talks a lot about the economy and finance. Now, there are some things that Dave Ramsey says that I think can work really well. And then there are times when Dave Ramsey makes statements where I feel like he's really out of touch with current generations and what's going on economically for a lot of us that are millennials and Gen Z and actually even Gen X. So Dave Ramsey said, "Mama can't protect you." Dave Ramsey has a blunt message for young adults who live with their parents. 3 things you need to do to get ahead and get your own place. So it says that more young adults are choosing to live at home with their parents, but many of them are using what they are saving on rent to splurge on designer handbags and expensive jewelry instead. Okay. Morgan Stanley analysts say that young adults have more room in their budget for discretionary spending and are helping to drive a boom in the luxury goods industry. Now, I will say people who I know that are in this situation are not spending their money on designer handbags and are not buying jewelry. Some of you might be in the chat. It goes on to say Americans are paying nearly 40% more on home insurance compared to 12 years ago. Better than NFTs, you don't have to be ultra rich to own a piece of a Pablo Picasso. Hold on to your money. Jeff Bezos says you might want to rethink buying a new automobile, refrigerator, or whatever. Personal finance author and radio host Dave Ramsey criticized the thread on The Ramsey Show, calling it a train wreck. So let me get this straight. You live in your mama's basement. You got a Coach purse. Here's what's going to happen. You cannot avoid life. It's coming for your butt. Mama can't protect you. Let's say something about the purses for just a second. Dave Ramsey may not be aware, and yes, there may be some people who are doing this, but what I think, Dave Ramsey's probably not buying designer purses unless he's buying it for like his wife or something, right? But Dave Ramsey may not be aware of is that nowadays you can get a designer handbag not from the designer. Okay. You can get a Coach purse, a Louis Vuitton purse, a Kate Spade purse. You can get those purses on Poshmark for a lot cheaper. Sweary Fairy says, I have a designer bag from the Goodwill. Exactly. See, this is how you shop smart. You can get these designer handbags from Marshalls, TJ Maxx, maybe not Louis Vuitton, but you can get the Kate Spade ones there. And you can get Coach handbags there. So just because you see someone with a designer handbag, that doesn't mean they paid full price for that purse. Just keep that in mind. Whether you're an adult living with your parents or you have kids who haven't left the nest, these simple rules can help if the family home is starting to feel a little bit crowded. Why are young adults still living at home? Almost half of young adults age 18 to 29 are living with their parents, the highest level since 1940, according to the US Census. But why are they having to do that? Let's see. When I graduated college, we were heading into another economic crisis at that time. In my field, people weren't hiring. I had several interviews, not hiring. And what do I mean by that? Have you ever gone on the job interview and then they call you back and say they've decided not to fill the position? Situations like that. Don't have the funds. Short on the money. Why else may people be in that situation? The job market, inflation, and the industries have changed. And when I say that the industries have changed, let me tell you what I mean. The major that you chose when you were a freshman, by the time you may have graduated college, it may just be so that that industry is not booming the way that it was when you chose that major. This happens to a lot of people. I told you guys, when I went to undergrad, I majored in broadcast journalism and English. By the time I graduated college, guess who was not trying to hire people? Local news stations, PR agencies, because I could do either with my major, communication fields. They weren't trying to hire people. We were in an economic crisis. Those industries, usually during that time, they don't have the money to hire people for those fields. So the people who got in either stayed in or they were laid off. These things happen. Maybe I didn't pick the best major, but I've seen this happen to people who picked majors that I actually thought were going to be pretty profitable for them. Think about the people who did major in economics or majored in finance, and then they graduated during the time where the housing crisis started. And all those people were being laid off on Wall Street. So you never really know what's going to happen. The economy can change at any time. We don't really know. Not to mention, you have to consider AI. Some of these jobs have been phased out because of AI. So some of these positions where you need to fill people, and I'm going to go ahead and give you a warning about the tech industry as well. The tech industry is another one where if I were you, I would not get too comfortable, especially considering Google and Microsoft and Facebook just announced they're laying off thousands of people. A lot of people choosing to go to these coding boot camps. That's nice. But even with you guys, I would not get comfortable because they're already talking about plans for AI to be able to code. So they don't have to hire people to do coding. So I don't like it when people like Dave Ramsey try to blame all the ownership of this on the young people. Those kids did what they were told to do by their guidance counselors when they were in high school, and for some of them by their parents as well. Go to college so you can get a good job so you won't have to struggle financially. Those kids were basically sold a failed dream. Let's go back in. Multi-generational living has been steady across, as being, how did they phrase this? Multi-generational living, I think they meant they forgot the H. Multi-generational living has been steadily increasing over the past 5 decades. Although the economic repercussions of the pandemic put a spotlight on the trend, with many adults boomeranging back home. So they're called the boomerang generation because they left the nest and then they return back home, coming back at you just like a boomerang. So again, even the article points out this has been increasing over the past 5 decades. So I don't want people to assume it all happened because of the pandemic. While the host of the Ramsey Show claimed these adult children are being enabled and coddled, many simply cannot afford to live on their own in the current economic climate. And this is the piece where I feel like people like Dave Ramsey are just out of touch. Are there some of these kids that may have had helicopter parents? Yes. Are there some of these kids that may have had lawnmower parents? Yes. But that doesn't change the fact that the economy that we have today is not making it so that the majority of these kids can live on their own. Rent is incredibly expensive. Food is expensive. And I'm not just talking about eating out. I'm talking about just food that you buy at the grocery store. Everything costs so much more now. You have a minimum wage that hasn't increased since Bill Clinton. So for the most part, or actually Obama. Was it Obama? Hasn't increased since Obama, I think. Still, the federal minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. And so what are these kids supposed to do? So that's something I want you to keep in mind. Now, some of you may wonder I'm seeing this chat. Some of you may wonder what's helicopter and lawnmower. Helicopter parents are the parents that hover over their children like a helicopter, just to make sure that they're okay and everything's going to be all right. Lawnmower parents are the ones that actually move obstacles out of their child's way so that the kids don't have to deal with obstacles. They mow those obstacles away like a lawnmower. So yes, those parents do exist, but that doesn't change what's been happening with the economy and the fact that wages have not adjusted for inflation. Rising rents and high mortgage rates have made it much more difficult to move out. And high inflation is impacting everything from gas to groceries, while interest rate hikes are raising borrowing costs. So notice they mentioned the rent, the mortgage rate, and we also have inflation. And I think what you also need to understand is this. A lot of young people can't afford to buy a house because they can't afford the down payment. It's just a reality of the situation. My parents were able to buy a home. My parents did not go to college. What does that tell you, you guys? My parents were able to buy a home, not just one home. My parents bought a second home. So my parents have bought a house twice. Do we see this happening for people in my generation? Hells no. Most of the people I know cannot afford to buy a home. And I'm talking about people that went to college. So what we have is an American dream that is now unattainable to a lot of Americans. It's hard to even get the things that you're supposed to have to be a part of the American dream now, regardless of what degree you have. And that causes kids to go back to school. Let me go back and get that master's. I was one of those people. Let me go back. Maybe I should get my PhD so I have a better opportunity. Then you get in more debt because of student loans. Now, there was a segment about this. News Nations talked about this. I want you to hear what they had to say. Boomerang kids moving back in with their parents. Check this out.
The big finale of our News Nation special series, America's College Crisis.
All over the nation, empty nests are not so empty anymore because a growing number of college graduates are moving back in with their parents. Our Nancy Liu is joining us with more on the new normal. Nancy, I guess I never thought that it was going away, that kids moved back home once they were over age.
Oh, but it is back big time, Adrienne. They are called boomerang kids. You send them out, they come right back, because these days having a college degree does not guarantee a high-paying job or any job at all. So college graduates are moving back in with their parents in record numbers.
I made these forever ago.
What does that tell you, what she just said, you guys? A college degree these days does not guarantee a job where you'll be paid well enough to live on your own. We are living in late stage capitalism. Salma says, well said, Sabby, those kids were sold a failed dream. 100%. 100%. Hell, honestly, looking back on things, you would have been better off. Now you have to like doing this job, but you would have been better off going to community college for 2 years and becoming a dental hygienist. Because a friend of mine is a dental hygienist, and she makes more than some of us that have 4-year degrees, some of us that have master's degrees. Let's go on.
More than 3 years since graduating from college, 25-year-old Zoe Zarenda is back in her childhood bedroom in Connecticut.
We did this at a birthday party. I think I was maybe turning 10 or something.
And now she's regretting the bedroom color she picked as a teenager.
It's this god-awful blue that I decided to paint it when I was 13, 14 years old. Never would have. This pink carpet has been here since they moved in when I was in my mom's stomach.
This wasn't the plan, working remotely from her parents' home. But Zoe has student loan debt and makes less than $55,000 a year working for a pharmaceutical company.
Zoe makes less than $55,000 a year, and she's working for a pharmaceutical company. College graduate. Now, some people listening will be like, oh, $55,000, that's plenty of money. Not these days. Let's go on.
You know, they say you're supposed to be able to make 3 times your rent to afford it. I don't make 3 times. Most of the people I graduated with live at home with their parents, and a lot of them also work full time.
And you're able to save a lot more money, which if you do that when you're 24, 25, 26, can really springboard you into other future goals, whether that's.
But they shouldn't have to do this, though. Like, this is the problem. They should not have to even go there. They shouldn't have to deal with this. You know, it's like you have to move back home and live with your parents. What was she just telling you? Most of the people I know doing the same thing. They had to go back home and live with their parents. This is a failed American dream. It's a failed economy. It's a failed state. And I have to say it again, for people who don't come from wealth, it is very difficult for those kids who are coming from middle-class families. We didn't even get to working class. I'm starting with middle-class families. It is very difficult for those kids to go to college without some form of student loans. Then you have debt. Then the companies don't want to pay college-educated kids what they should be paid, especially when you account for inflation today. They don't even want to pay them. There was something she said about making 3 times the rent, and I really want to focus on that for just a second. This is another reason why some of the college kids cannot afford to get their own place. So you got the job. You have the salary. You're able to show, listen, here are my pay stubs. This is how much I make. But unfortunately, some of the landlords and these apartment property management companies, they will not rent to you unless you make 3 times the rent. So if you live in a city like Boston, where the average 1 bedroom is like $2,000 something a month, and you're not making 3 times that a month, you're not going to be able to get that apartment unless they allow you to get a cosigner. Some of them don't allow that. So then what do you have to do? Now you got to find roommates. This is where you go hunting on Craigslist to find people that you don't even know to live with, just so you can say you have your place. That is not why people go to college. And that is not the American dream. And I don't understand how some of these property companies expect these kids to make 3 times the rent. Guys, if it's $2,000 for 1 bedroom, 3 times the rent, that's $6,000 a month. How many people are making that right out of college? Failed state of affairs.
Home ownership or different things that might have been challenging for you if you had not done that.
Zoe's parents don't blame her. They know it's a different world now.
When I got out of college, I was able to get a car and a job and an apartment. And it bothers me that it's difficult for our children now to be able to do that.
But at least he understands. That's right, JB. And you got to pass that credit check. But at least he understands. He sees there's a difference. He was able to get a car when he graduated from college. This is not happening. And then people wonder why. They're like, why are millennials and Gen Z, why aren't they buying cars? Why aren't they getting married? Why aren't they starting families? With what money, bruh? Get married, start families. Some people don't feel comfortable dating someone if they're living with their parents. Let's just be real. If you're an adult and you have to move back in with your parents, some people don't feel comfortable being in a serious relationship with someone because it's like, yo, I live with my parents. You know, you had that freedom that you had in college, and now you go back home to live with your parents and you don't really have that anymore. And I got to tell you a story that's might make some of you guys laugh. When I graduated from college, I moved back in to live with my parents it was about 1.5 years to save money. I was lucky. My parents didn't make me pay any type of rent or anything. I was lucky and fortunate. Not everyone has it that way. Now, that being said, keep in mind, I had been on my own for 4 years, and I moved back home, and all of a sudden I was reminded that this was my parents' house. My mom told me one day, I'll never forget this. The first week I moved back in, my mom said, "You didn't make your bed." I was like, what? I'm like 20 something years old. My dad, what did he say? "You left your dish in the sink." "Oh yeah, Dad, I was coming back to wash it." We don't leave dishes in the sink in this house. What? I remember one night coming home late to my parents' house. I was hanging out with a friend. We were hanging out late. I'll just be honest. We were out late. I came back home, crept into the house, or at least tried to. You know how you try to be quiet, and then there's always that one step that decides to make a noise. So I'm walking up the step, and that one step goes, and I was like, damn. And so I finished walking up the steps, go into the room, jump into the bed. 5 minutes later, the lights come on. My dad is like, "Are you just getting home?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." "Where you been?" "I was hanging out with my friend." "I don't care who you were hanging out with. In this house, you do not come home at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I remember I was just like, what the hell is happening? I'm an adult. I've been doing this for 4 years. On a Friday night or a Saturday night, I'm going out with my friends and we're going to have fun. And I'm going back to my dorm room. And then it really hit me. When you move back in with your parents, sometimes, even though you're an adult, your parents can still treat you as though you are a kid. And I learned very quickly that when I'm in someone else's house, I have to go by their rules. Quick little story for you there. Let's go on.
Research shows 25% of young adults between 25 and 34 living back at home with family, a major shift from just 9% in 1971. Psychotherapist Stacy Kaiser says it's become so common, there's a new term for it.
It's called a boomerang kid. That's someone who leaves home and then comes back. And I am seeing more of that than ever before.
According to Kaiser, ground rules should be set before a boomerang kid returns.
That might include things like paying rent, or having to have a job, or making sure that you participate in chores so that you're a part of the community in the house and not just getting a meal ticket.
Zoe hopes to be on her own again within a year, but her parents have no timeline.
I'm not that mom that can just say, get out, you're on your own, you can do this, bye. I can't. I just can't do that.
Everyone I know lives with someone or at home. And it's weird that it's the norm, but it's also a very comforting thing to know that I had a family to come home to.
Now, the start of the pandemic triggered a massive wave of boomerang kids returning home. An estimated 67% of those kids are still at home.
Thank you for watching. Go to News Nation now.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation. JB says, try bringing someone back to your place and the walls are thin. Yeah, no way, man. You guys got to remember, my dad was military, so my house was like Fort Knox. Like, seriously, like everything would have been great if that step just didn't happen to make a noise. Jesus, it had to make a noise. Delthea said something, I lost it. It was there. And Delthea said, Sabs, you don't disrespect someone else's house, but I'm sure you were told that. Yes. Oh my God. You know, I was like, I'm an adult. I got this, man. Everything's cool. And then my parents quickly reminded me that it was their house. Look, my parents and I get along so much better with me not living there. Okay. Let's just go there. Let's just say that. Okay. But even Insider talked about this, and they said millennials dominate the US workforce, but they're still 10 times poorer than boomers. 10 times. I'm not going to read the entire article, but there's a couple of parts here I want to highlight right about here. Millennials may be the largest generation workforce in the US, but they're also the least wealthy. The generation holds just 4.6% or 5.19 trillion of US wealth. Now, this is coming from Bloomberg, and they got their data from the Federal Reserve. Boomers, however, are 10 times wealthier. They hold 53.2% or 59.96 trillion of US wealth. That's also twice the 28.5 trillion of US wealth that Gen X holds. Guys, boomers are 10 times wealthier than millennials. Now, something went wrong. You tell me. Let's go on. There's another piece I want to highlight here. The Fed defined millennials as those born between 1981 and 1996, and boomers as those born between 1946 and 1964. It's a stark generational wealth gap, considering there are 56 million millennials in the workforce. And that's coming from the Pew Research Center, more than any other generation. That means we are being exploited, guys. By comparison, there are 41 million boomers in the workforce. So we have the largest generation in the workforce. And yet the boomer generation is 10 times more wealthier than we are. That means we are being exploited like hell. The wealth gap is partially explained by the fact that boomers are older, so they've had more time to accumulate wealth. Millennials haven't yet reached their peak earning years, and the youngest are still earning entry-level salaries. I disagree with this. Define peak earning years, because there are millennials that are 38 and 39. There are millennials that are 40. So define peak earning years. I know people in their late 40s still have to have roommates. So I disagree with that. Yes, the boomers have, they are older. So yeah, they've had more time, but that doesn't negate what that young woman's father said in that clip about the fact that he was able to buy a car when he graduated from college. So again, so something changed. These wages haven't adjusted for inflation. That's part of it. There's a movie called Failure to Launch. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. It's a romantic comedy. Matthew McConaughey's in it. I love Matthew McConaughey. I think he's just so, I don't know. I'm usually not attracted to guys with the Southern accent, but for some reason with Matthew McConaughey, like his accent is a little bit different. It's like it's Southern. It has a little bit of twang to it, but it's a different kind of twang. Anyway, getting to the point. So Matthew McConaughey is in this movie called Failure to Launch. I actually like that movie. That movie talks about another category of adults that live with their parents. These aren't the adults that moved away and came back like the boomerang generation. These are the adults that never left their parents' house. And he was one of those people in the movie. And I think what's important, if you haven't seen the movie, watch the movie, because at the end, there's actually like a 3-minute segment where they talk to people who are actually a part of that failure to launch category and why they never moved out of their parents' house. right? And so I think what's important to note here about people not leaving their parents, I've always wanted to get out of my parents' house. I told you that place was like Fort Knox. But anyway, one of the things that his character says in the movie, there was a tragedy that happened with him, but at the same time, it's like home meant comfort to him. His mom did his laundry, folded his clothes, always cooked the meals and things like that. And then it was the risk of leaving that, right? And it wasn't that financially he couldn't do it. But like he said, mom and dad kind of took care of everything and he didn't want to let that go. And for some people, there's that factor as well. But what was interesting to me about that movie is that it was made fun of, it was mocked, right? Because in American culture, that's not considered, I don't know, attractive to not leave your parents' house, right? But when you look at other cultures, that's actually not unusual. When you look at some of the other cultures, it's not unusual for an adult not to leave their parents' house until they get married. And I've talked to people like this, and even some, like a friend of mine's from India, she even told me, like, back home, like even after getting married, it wasn't unusual for the entire family to live together. So why is it looked down upon in the United States? Why is it looked down upon? I think part of it is because the US has this individualistic culture. You know, the Olive Garden says, when you're here, you're family. In the US, when you're here, you're on your own. It just is what it is. There's this mindset here that in the US, you get your own and you get it for you. We don't really operate together as a community. But if you talk to people that live in other countries, it's the exact opposite. That you would never leave your community. You would never just abandon the home. That if you make money, your money is your family's money. So you're all working together. But in the US, it's looked down upon. She's Black said there's nothing wrong living with your parents. There was a song by TLC called No Scrubs. And TLC said in that song, if you live at home with your mother, I'm talking to you. If you're sitting on the passenger side of your best friend's ride, I'm talking to you. Why? Why is it that way? Maybe we need to change our way of thinking. Maybe someone is not considered a bad person just because they live with their parents. Maybe there's something else going on there. But there is this sense of shaming in the United States for people that live with their parents. Maybe we should stop doing that. Someone said that Matthew McConaughey is from Louisiana. I thought he was from Texas. No. Oh, you guys are singing No Scrubs now. That's right. Captain Obvious trying to holler at me. That's what they said in the song. They said, if you live at home with your mother, I'm talking to you. Like, damn. Looking back on it now, like if you were in that situation, if you were one of those guys that was living at home with your mom, let's just say you were one of those guys that graduated from college and you moved back in and you were trying to save up money. TLC was like, nah. Leroy says capitalism loves promoting that hyper individualism. There you go. Miguel says TLC was doing capitalist propaganda. They were like, you are a scrub. Sitting on the passenger side of your best friend's ride. We're not trying to have none of that. Okay. JB says a lot of us were told to get into information tech and now Microsoft just fired 10,000 people. Yep. Thanks for this super chat, Roger. Boomers conned you, then blame you for falling for it. JB says, yep, I'm 38 and will never be able to buy a home. My mom is 71 and never could afford to buy a home. This is the reality for a lot of people. She's Black says it also makes selling out a lot easier. Yes. Thanks for the super chat, Delthea. Americans aren't failing. America is failing Americans. The rent is too damn high and the wages are too damn low. Speak truth to power, Delthea.